Yeah, I mean, today I don't plan on this being too serious. I think we'll just go through what we've been working on, like everything we've built. We've been like head down, building quite a lot of new stuff, a lot of improvements on existing stuff. So I think I'll still record this anyway, so I'll probably put it up for people who miss it in case they are interested. But I think we'll do some more kind of proper Q&A sessions in January to really go through what we've been working on. But for now, I'll just kind of give a rough rundown on the things that have been in the work. So obviously we had like over the summer we launched kind of the new version of what was the new version at that point, V3 of the Malt stablecoin. It's worked pretty well. I think like we were obviously lacking in demand, which is understandable, I think, given everything that's happened, like with V1, V2 and stuff, and then also just like the whole market climate at the time. Fortunately, that is swinging around again, like the crypto is starting to look up again. So I think in terms of the timing of that, things are looking pretty good for us. Uh, but I think what we learned through that, like the whole V3 launch, is that the stablecoin mechanism itself works pretty well. But where we were really lacking is in the kind of intrinsic utility and incentive to use the coin and to create cash flow. The mechanism worked in isolation, but it had no real driving force that created sustainable cash flow because it's almost like the chicken and the egg problem. Like we need people to use the coin to create the cash flow, but then people won't use the coin until there's cash flow. So that was the conundrum that we've been wrestling with since then, knowing that we kind of have this mechanism that works pretty well, but we really need more to get the whole thing to just cohesively fit together and work in a way that's going to really drive sustainability and cash flow going forward for the whole ecosystem. So that's where we've been placing all of our energy. And in a nutshell, what we've done is we've built a DEX, but it's kind of more than that. So I think the way that I think about it is we've built a kind of a hybrid market making system. So we've kind of taken the ideas of a DEX, like it's kind of a hybrid between Uniswap and Curve. It's got stable pools, stable swap pools, and Uniswap V2 style pools. No concentrated liquidity right now. Maybe we'll have that one day, but for now, I don't think we need it because we have this additional concept, which is kind of taking the idea of the swing trader that we've had in V1 or V2 and 3 and integrating that idea into the DEX. So the swing trader is now we're really calling it the market maker. And it's functioning like a traditional market maker would in many cases. And then we have the automated market maker. So we bring the both of them together in what we're kind of calling a hybrid market making system. And what's happening there is we have like a curve style pool. Let's just focus on the stable swap pools for now, where that's a stable swap invariant. So you get like your kind of good level of like flat liquidity like you would on curve. But you still have, it's still just like a single invariant curve that operates at all ranges of liquidity. Because we're lacking the concentrated liquidity, it's got a range across all possible liquidity. And that works great. That automatic market making system has really been tried and tested. We know that works. It's a really good system. But the traditional market making system is much more dynamic. You have companies that offer market making solutions, and they're using their own bespoke trading like algorithms and like statistical arbs and whatever else they're using to in real time calibrate to the market. And obviously we can't do anything as sophisticated as that on chain because that would cost a ton of gas, and it would also be whatever edges we have there are kind of diminished to zero. But what we've done is taken the idea of the swing trader, which was just a simple concept of when it's profitable to do so, the protocol will buy or sell malt. So if we have 100% collateral for the sake of argument, and the price is currently at 99 cents, then the swing trader would just buy at, like, it can buy at 99 cents, and it's saving some money because it can afford to pay a dollar, and we're making money in doing that. And then it's the same thing above peg, and you can sell above peg and make some money if you sold it at $1.01. And that was kind of the idea that we've had for a while now in V2 and V3, and that's working. But what we realized as we were working on the DEX is that if we integrated that idea into the DEX, we could have a hybrid system that is somewhere in between an automatic market maker curve and a traditional market maker that's actually buying and selling with actual liquidity. So that's kind of what we've built. So we still have the ability to trigger the swing trader much like we did in V2 and 3, but it's also now built into the DEX such that when it's almost like a just-in-time liquidity is the way that I like to think about it technically. So when a trader goes to the Malt UI to make a swap, let's say the actual DEX price is 98 cents, but the swing trader, what we're calling the market maker now, could buy at anything less than 99 cents. But the DEX is currently at 98 cents. So in V3, as it stands, that would require somebody to trigger the swing trader, and the swing trader would buy. But then we have to think about front running, and there's all sorts of like weird like complexities that we have to add into the code there to make it not possible for people to front run that. And that became kind of difficult to manage. So there was all this complexity that was falling out. But what we realized is now that we control the DEX, we can quote the price of the DEX as if the swing trader has already bought. So even though the DEX price is 98 cents, we'll quote the price at whatever the price the swing trader would bring it up to. So let's say it brings it up to 99 cents. Even though the DEX price is 98 cents, we're quoting it as 99 because we know that the swing trader will bring it back to 99 as soon as it's triggered. But we don't need to trigger it yet because it will trigger just in time as the trade comes through. So when a trader comes through and triggers a trade, they're quoted 99 cents, they trigger their trade, that will then bring the swing trader into action. It will buy up to 99 cents, and that's done in a privileged way that doesn't have to go through all of the kind of typical checks that a DEX would have to go through. So it's a little more gas efficient. And then the trader's trade triggers from 99 cents. So now we don't have to worry about front running because it's literally impossible to front run that trade because it's built into the DEX. And we have then effectively infinite liquidity depth below whatever the swing trader price is. So if the swing trader is willing to pay 99 cents, anything below 99 cents, we effectively, in practice, have infinite liquidity because we can buy back the entire supply of malt. So obviously, in theory, we don't have infinite liquidity, but in practice, there's a limited supply of malt. So we can actually buy back the entire supply there. So integrating those two things means that we have this like really dynamic market making solution that is just useful. It's an interesting kind of step forward, creating this hybrid DEX situation. So I think that's interesting in and of itself. But where it really comes into its own is when we then start integrating in the cross pool ARB. So as right now, we've just been talking about single pool, the stable swap pools, but the Malt DEX also supports non-stable pools, and any pool can be created on the Malt DEX for any token you want, just like on Uniswap. And for any one of those tokens, there's a staking pool for Malt, just like there is right now. There's just a Malt DAI pool. But on the Malt DEX, you can create like a Malt Shiba pool, for example, and that immediately creates a staking pool for that. And you can like stake your LP tokens into that. And what you do if you're in that pool is you also earn ARB, because there's an ARB system that's working across every possible pair that's on the DEX. And this ARB system is giving the Malt ARB system has a fee of 0 on any trade that it makes. So while other traders who are trying to ARB this external to the protocol, they have to pay the fees to ARB it, which gives the internal ARB system a massive edge against those, which means that we're probably in practice going to capture a hefty chunk of all of the arbitrage possible on every token that ever gets minted onto the Malt DEX. And all of that, well, not all of it, but most of that gets fed back to LPs who are staked in the pool. And that serves two purposes. One, it's just another source of yield, which has never been tapped into by any realistic DEX. And the amount of ARB that gets pulled off on chain is crazy. Like there's so much ARB profit that gets created every single day on DEXs, and that just goes straight into the pockets of the ARB bots. The Malt DEX is going to allow that to go into the pockets of the LPs. But that also kind of inadvertently starts to solve the impermanent loss issue as well, because all impermanent loss is effectively money that comes out of the pocket of the LP and into the pocket of the arbor. But because the Malt DEX is capturing like in excess of 50% of that ARB, it means that impermanent loss will be significantly lower to anybody who's on the Malt DEX as opposed to any other. So that's like a kind of a massive bonus that just falls out of that. And the big thing about that is that we don't actually strictly need to be a dominant DEX for this to work. And this is kind of like a big shift in the way that we're thinking about it. We don't need to build the biggest DEX in the world, and we don't need to be the dominant DEX in the world. In fact, we kind of don't really want to be. All the Malt DEX exists to do is to provide a location, an engine of growth for the stablecoin itself. The stablecoin is still our primary focus. So most DEXs that have a stablecoin, it's a DEX first, and the stablecoin is tangential. We're a stablecoin, and the DEX exists purely to serve the stablecoin. And that's kind of like a big shift for that in the way that we think about that. But as other DEXs move, like let's say for the sake of example, there's like UniV3 on Polygon, and then we've got the Malt DEX. And there's an ETH Malt pool on the Malt DEX, and there's a Malt DAI pool on the Malt DEX. But then there's an ETH DAI pool on Uniswap, and that provides a triangulated ARB. And as Uniswap price moves, that allows us to make profit on the ARB without ever needing trades to happen on the Malt DEX. But as that ARB happens, whoever's providing liquidity on the Malt DEX is going to earn fees or earn the ARB yield. And they can do that in any token. So if they're really bullish on Shiba or like whatever meme coin or like USDC or ETH or Matic or Wrap Bitcoin or like Aave, whatever token they want, you can create a pool on MaltDEX, and by staking in that pool, you will be earning any ARB that's created against other DEXs that are on that chain. So as the Aave price starts to move on polygons like Uniswap or QuickSwap or like whatever other DEX, Malt can ARB that, and you can start earning fee in that token. So you can start accruing yield in the tokens you're bullish on, which is kind of a huge deal to be able to do that. But we literally don't need people to trade on the Malt DEX for that to happen. Obviously, if people do start using the Malt DEX to trade, then that just provides even more opportunity for ARB, because now there's like price discrepancy on both sides. Uniswap's moving as well as the Malt DEX. So that's just creating even more ARB. But even if there is literally no other activity on the Malt DEX, we can still make money because the other DEXs are moving. And that's always creating ARB. So that's kind of the whole system that just provides this engine of growth that powers the stablecoin itself. And a point to mention, just kind of taking it back, is we only ever mint new malt into stable pools. And this is like a big thing about the new design, is that we've, just like how the DAI pool works today, we only mint new malt into that pool. And we always wrestled with the idea of how do we generalize that system into supporting multiple other pools, like ETH. Because we can't be minting into an ETH pool because the ETH price is volatile. So we might end up just rugging ourselves by doing that, by minting into a pool that's actually just collapsing. Like if the malt or if the ETH price collapses 50% in a day, and we're minting a ton of malt into that pool to like stabilize it, but the pool isn't aware that the ETH price is actually just tanking, then we just rugged ourselves. So that's not good. So what we've done is we only mint into stable pools, which now have a stable swap invariant, so the slippage is way less. So when we move, I think like whatever the price is on the current QuickSwap pool, like 92 cents or whatever, when we move that liquidity over to the new DEX, like the price is going to be very, very close to one, like 99+%, like 99 plus cents, just because of the way that that stable swap invariant works. So that like solves that big problem. Obviously, trades have less slippage. It's just like a better price generally. So that's just a big win anyway. Now we're minting only into those pools. So that could be DAI, USDC, Frax, whatever other stable coins we want. And that becomes the foundation bedrock of the entire system. And then all these other pools are trading against Malt, ETH, and Aave, and whatever else. And we can ARB those. And that's how those pools are staying stable, is by ARBing them. So in a sense, if there's like discrepancies on those price discrepancies get communicated in inadverted quotes to the stable pools via the ARB. Because as the price on ETH moves, the ARB happens, but it usually has to go through one of the stable pools. It's like it goes from like ETH into Malt, then Malt into DAI, then DAI back into ETH on Uniswap, for example. So it's almost always a 3-pool swap. So that is communicating some of that into the DAI pool and dragging that price up or down. And then that then triggers whatever stabilization on those pools, which allows the whole system can react to global dynamics just by controlling the stable pools. And that means that our risk is much lower. So that's kind of like a high level overview of the whole thing. But now what we end up doing is, because we're ARBing, we can have collateral in any token, because some of the collateral or some of the ARB profit goes to the collateral. Like most of it goes to the LPs, but some of it does go to the collateral. And by default, like let's say somebody spins up a Shiba pool on the Malt DEX, and we start ARBing it, and we start making some Shiba. By default, we assume that's worthless. So there's a risk factor on every token, and the risk factor on every token by default is 0, meaning we assume this is worthless, however much of it we've got. But then we can increase those risk factors. So we might set it to 10%, in which case we take 10%, the kind of oracle value of that token. And that allows us to, over time, decentralize the collateral base away from stables. So initially it has to be mostly stables, because that's what we're minting into. So we're minting new Malt and getting DAI or USDC or Frax or some other stable in return. So that creates this base where we should be very close to 100% collateralized in stables. And whatever ARB profit we make is just additional on top. So we might have 99% collateral in stables, but then we make some ARB on ETH and all these other tokens, and then we start to increase the risk factors on those. So say for ETH, we might set it at 50%, because we're pretty confident the ETH is pretty good. It's not going to go to 0 anytime soon, but we don't want to count it as 100%, because then we're taking all the volatility. So we give ourselves a buffer. We say it's 50% risk factor. And that means if we hold 10K in ETH at the current price, we will assume that it's worth 5K in collateral. And that now counts. So that maybe takes our collateral from 99% up to 101%, or whatever it happens to be. And over time, as that starts to progress, loads of different coins are happening. Some of those coins are going to moon. Like maybe there's some meme coin that starts to trade. It gets really popular. We're ARBing the hell out of it. And we've got a ton of it. And then maybe we say, okay, this is like super risky, but we'll add this at a 5% risk factor. But then maybe that coin like does a 500x, in which case we now have a ton of it, and that's counting towards collateral. And we don't count at all, so we're not like really at the risk of the volatility. But then one thing that we don't have yet, but we will, is building in the idea that Paradigm laid out of a TWAM, which Frax has, of a time-weighted average market maker, which allows you to kind of TWAP in and out of coins. And we'll build that into the Malt DEX using a kind of hook system similar to how Uniswap v4 works. And that will allow us to move tokens in and out of different assets. So if we have a ton of Shiba, or like whatever meme coin, and it goes up a ton, the governance system of Malt might decide that we don't want to hold a ton of this, but we do have a ton of it because we've made a bunch of it because of the ARB system. And then we can TWAM that out into ETH or into Malt or whatever token we want to. And that will allow the collateral to start to redistribute over time. So we might get a ton of activity on a meme coin, and then the governance system redirects that into something more stable. Like, I say stable as in not necessarily price wise, but in terms of robustness in collateral. And we can create this system where the assets in the system are decentralizing over time because there's more and more assets. They're growing because we're all kind of bullish cryptos. We're assuming that over time, this almost acts like an index tracking fund of all of crypto, because we're creating all of this ARB, we've got all of these assets, and then these assets are going to inflate according to the entire market. So it's almost an index fund for the entire market. So the Malt collateral becomes this index fund for the entire market that over time, and I'm talking like decades, we will start to own more volatile assets than we have stable assets. And that allows the system to decentralize itself away from any one given risk factor. Because right now, like, Malt is beholden to DAI. That's just a fact of where we are right now. It's unfortunate, but it's just like we have to start here. We obviously don't want that over the long term, but we have to start there. But this is the roadmap now, that we can create more and more assets in our collateral by building on top of this ARB system. But this is only possible because we now have the DEX that can give us 0% with this additional market maker embedded in it, which also creates some profit because of the market making activity that's built in. So we have ARB, we have this market making. We've also got fees on the DEX, as any DEX would, and all of this kind of incentivizes LPs to provide liquidity. And then we don't even need traders to use it, as I've said, because we can ARB against other DEXs. Traders might want to use it though. And that's where this kind of next stage comes in, which is we're going to have a token, which, to be very clear, is not a governance token. But it will be a token that's not Malt, that is initially going to operate as a fee reduction and value accrual token for, like, traders, I guess. So if you have this token, so you're going to earn it, it's going to be liquidity mined, just like you would on any other DEX. Then you can stake that. So this is like additional APR, I guess. You can think about it in the short term that it's like, you can, if you're providing liquidity, you earn some of this token. Fair enough. That's like standard stuff. Nothing too novel there. You can then stake that token, and if you do, you have a fee reduction on the DEX. So you pay less fees than you would if you didn't have this token, and that's perhaps going to incentivize some level of traders wanting to use the DEX, because now we have this kind of multiple incentives. We've got incentives for the LPs, which are very clear. You're just making more money. You can earn the token, you can earn the ARB yield, you can earn the trading fees. All good. If you're a trader, you can now hold this token and you can like pay less fees for trading, which is obviously also good. And then on top of that, in the long term, as we start to accrue more and more collateral, we can start to pay back to those as a value accrual to the token holders of that token. So if we have 110% collateral, according to our risk factors, it probably means we actually have much more. Like, if we set our risk factors correctly, we might have 150% collateral. And we don't need that much, especially if our risk adjusted collateral is 110. So we can start to redistribute some of that, because all of that extra profit, like the fact that we've got from 100% to 150%, is not because of minting new malt. Minting new malt just keeps us flat at 100% because we're only ever minting into stables. So the fact that we're now over collateralized is because of the ARB system has been doing its job. It's been working. It's been accruing profit. So we can start to redistribute that back to holders. And that's where that token comes in. But that token has zero governance power. That's a big point, because we don't want to mess those incentives up. Governance within the Malt system is going to be strictly tied to LPs with skin in the game. Those are the people who are risking their capital to help the Malt system function. So those are the people that get to dictate what the Malt system does. That's the governance system. This token has zero governance power, but it will be a fee reduction coin in the short term, and in the long term, hopefully a value accrual one as well. And And that also just kind of juices up the APR in the short term, which is kind of like that's just the game we've got to play. But that's seems like a well balanced way to do it, rather than just like dishing out governance power. We're dishing out some utility, which is the fee reduction on the DEX, but we can do that in a way that allows holders to perhaps make more money from the value accrual as well in the long run. So I guess that's like kind of a high level overview of everything that we're working on. I'm trying to think, is there anything else in terms of like the core mechanisms? I think that's kind of it. Multex, hybrid market maker, ARB system, any pool can exist, staking on all of them, fee reduction token, value accrual in the long run, governance. That's kind of it. But all of those pieces are kind of like that's everything. That's kind of all that we ever planned on building, and we've sped up the timeline massively on that. Kind of thought that would take another 2 years from the launch of E3, and we've kind of got 95% of it done already. So I think we've sped that timeline up a lot. And I think that's like, I'm really excited about all of that, to be quite honest, because once we've got that really locked in, we can start thinking about multi-chain and like building out an ecosystem of developers around the ARB systems and an ecosystem of other protocols building on top um, to really solidify the ecosystem around like a real decentralized effort to build a stablecoin. It's not just us. Like we've built the foundations of this, but ultimately it becomes truly decentralized once builders start to build on top of it. There's other systems that are working on it. There's other builders who are building ARB strategies on top of it. Other DEXs are integrating, and there's all sorts of things happening, and that's where the value really accrues to the decentralized piece. Um, but yeah, that's kind of it on the high level of everything. So we will, like I said, we've 95% of this done. We're hoping to run a test net in January. So my kind of tentative timeline for this is that we run a test net through January and we launch in February with the full DEX, new token, stable swaps, ARB, like the whole 9 yards. Probably everything minus governance. Governance will come shortly after. And that's, if that works in the way that it should, I think like we'll start to really see cash flow coming through the system. And that's when we can really start to stress test how good is this actually functioning as a stablecoin? How likely are people to use it? And then we can try pick the holes in the narrative of like where are people apprehensive? Obviously, there's going to be some historical bias where people are like, this is a whole thing that's been going on for a while. They've tried a couple times, they failed, whatever. They're still going. So we'll have to wrestle a lot of that. But I think I'm more than confident that we can get that done because at the end of the day, whoever left for whatever reason, but they'll come back as soon as the money's there. That's just the way crypto works. There's a lot of pessimists around who don't believe. Obviously, everybody here already believes, so I don't have any issues there. I think like you guys are the ones that have really stuck by it and believe in the grand vision, and I think I'm very hopeful that you'll all be rewarded for that confidence that you've shown us because it's been a long journey for all of us. I think it's been when I first started building Malt, I certainly didn't think that I would still be here this far into it without a kind of really functioning like fully fledged product. I would have thought I would have either not done it or it would be working by now. But that's just the way the cookie crumbles, and all of tech, I guess, all of business is just it always takes longer than you think. And but I really, really do think we've got something special because we're just pulling on a source of funds that have never been tapped into in this kind of way. And the fact that Malt doesn't need to compete as a DEX is a really exciting thing for me because I never wanted to go down that route. I never wanted to compete as a DEX because that's just there's so many big incumbents there. Like Uniswap have such a big advantage, and then when it comes to the smaller dexes, it's just like a real hustle biz dev kind of situation, and that's never what I wanted to do. I wanted to build something that could stand on its own 2 feet and be its own thing as a decentralized protocol. Most DEXs are not that. They just require massive biz dev teams, and they just have to go out and shill and build relationships and really try compete for liquidity, because liquidity is thin on the ground, especially through bear markets. And then you need additional incentives to try and suck people in, and they've got all these things. It's like a whole thing. I never wanted to do any of that. But we figured out a way of kind of having our cake and eating it in a certain way, because we don't need to compete as a DEX. The DEX functions just as a market making platform to ARB's other DEXs. We're almost like just there to provide liquidity such that there's depth to allow the ARBs to happen, and then we almost rig the deck in our own favor. That we get exclusive access to the ARB on our DEX because we don't pay fees. And then in doing so, we can redistribute the fees, which reduces impermanent loss. So now the incentives for LPs are stacking up. So I think that's super, super exciting. And then we start to decentralize with governance and all the assets that we can have in collateral, and we can go multi-chain. And then I think we really have a shot at like becoming a stable coin that's worth using, because it's a stable coin you can bridge across chains. You can maybe do cross-chain swaps. It really functions as a good stable coin that's over collateralized in most cases, and it's got a wide, diverse set of collateral in there. If you provide liquidity in the DEX, it's lower impermanent loss, and then obviously you can accrue this value token. And if you believe that the Malt system is going to be successful over time, then presumably the value accrual mechanism there is going to produce some good value return on that token as well. So like there's a lot of good things going on. So yeah, I think that's about it. If anybody has like questions, I'm happy to go into more detail on some of these pieces. But I think I've said pretty much everything that I'd like to say on what we've been working on and where our mind has been at. So yeah, if you want to put your hand up in here or throw any questions into the AMA questions chat, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, I just thank everybody for sticking with us, because I know it's not been an easy journey for anyone involved, but I think we're making good progress. Doesn't look like there's any questions coming through, so if everybody's happy, then I'm happy to wrap it up there. And like I said, we'll run the test nets in January, and I'll do some more kind of broader calls to really go through this, and we'll have like new docs and all sorts of new information coming out in January. Yeah, Jay, can't believe it. Jay's like OG of OGs. He's, I think, one of the first people I ever spoke to about Malt, way back when, 2020, I think. And yeah, he was like my soundboard for a lot of the original. 3 kids since, wow, crazy. Yeah, it was being Jasmine was around in the very early days. Yeah, I remember those days. Yeah, it was good times. But yeah, I mean, like I said, really didn't expect to still be here, building, um, doing things when I had the first idea back when we were all just degenning on DSD, and I thought it was a cool idea. But it's like, maybe I should fork DSD. Nah, there's too much to change. I'll rebuild it. And now here we are. We've got a DEX and all kind of stuff. It's crazy. But those were the days. Back when crypto was simpler. Crypto is a bit too complicated these days. Yeah, no, I do. I agree, Tony. DSD is significantly more simple than where we've ended up. Although I would say Malt is much simpler now than it has been. It's kind of went on its own journey through complexity. I think V1 was like pretty naive and simple. V2 was a lot more complex. We introduced a lot more ideas. V3, we simplified a little bit, but there was still a lot of complexity. But that complexity existed because it needed to, in the sense that we were trying to keep things as modular as possible because we needed to be dynamic in how we move forward. And we only had a single pool. And that was kind of always the idea that we figure it out on a single pool and then we start to figure out how can we generalize these ideas to multiple pools. Um, and now that we've kind of figured out how this system works in the wild with real money for several months now, we've been able to consolidate so much of that logic into a much simpler set of contracts. So I would say we probably had something in the order of like 15 different contracts for V2 and 3, and I think that's down to about 5 now. So it's much more simple, which is obviously good for security. We consolidate funds as well in the way that the new system works. So it's the funds are stored in almost like a it's almost like a you can think of it like a kind of a protocol multi-sig, but it's controlled by the protocol itself. There's no external control. So there's no human signers on that. It's just controlled internally. But all of the funds within the system exist in one place, but the one place that they exist does nothing else but store the funds. So there's no kind of weird factors of like leaking cash or um, money going missing on in different contracts, which like not that that ever happened in V3, but the money wasn't spread around. It was like kind of dispersed along across quite a few different locations, and we've consolidated a lot of that. So I think, um, yeah, overall, I think that the system's got a lot simpler. Yeah, DSD made me a lot before losing even more. I actually kind of think I still have some DSD somewhere in a wallet buried somewhere. I think I got out most of it. I think in the first expansion, but then I held some, and then there was that whole. Oh, this is really dredging back on the memory, but there was the whole thing where there was some whale who kept stopping the price from getting above one, and then the treasury negotiated with him or something, and they bought him out for like 5 million or something like that, and then the token just completely died after that, which is so funny. But I'm pretty sure I still have like maybe 10k DSD sitting in the wallet somewhere. It's like an artifact of the hopium of those days. I love it. Fizboy, hope there's a recording. Yeah, I've recorded this, assuming I haven't made a mess of that process. I think there should be a recording. I'll release it on YouTube later this evening or tomorrow or something. It's over 400k. Oh wow, damn, rip. Yeah, that was a fun days though. I really have a nostalgia for those days of DSD and ESD and all the different forks. What was that one that Xi? They forgot to change 6 decimals on USDC to 18 for DAI, and it just like infinitely minted all the way through the debt cycle. Like stuff like that is like this is so beautiful. There's so much beauty in that because that was just such small stakes, I guess, relatively when you think of the things that happened subsequently with like Luna, and it's like it's no longer fun when it's $20 billion, but um, I'm pretty sure Jay it was called Zay, Zay. It was like a dye thing where they meant it produced dye. I can't even remember what their whole shtick was, but it was an exact fork of ESD, DSD that used USDC, but they forgot to change the decimals on USDC, which is 6 to 18 for dye. So it just infinitely minted, even all the way through the debt cycle, because they thought PEG was like 1E6, but it was actually 1E18. Is Rye still around? I remember reading something that they shut down, like where they return money to investors or something like that. Rye, it was really unfortunate actually. I think Rye was really good. Um, their idea was really cool. I think about Rye a lot actually. Um, their method of peg is something that I think we'll have to consider at some point. Because I've always said that I don't ever want to stay on the dollar peg. That's just not what we want to do for long term, right? It's like we talk about decentralization, and then it's like, well, we just peg to a single country's currency. That just it's not super good in the long run. But in the short run, I think we had to focus on a single pool to be able to generalize to multiple pools, and eventually, like we in the short term, we have to think about DAI or not DAI, sorry, US dollar as a peg, but over the long run, we'll remove that as well. And there is a lot of updates in the current code that we'll be launching soon that moves towards that. We obviously still will have a dollar peg, but the way that the system asks for peg and like thinks about peg is not strictly tied to the dollar anymore. It's it uses an oracle for its own peg now, albeit the oracle just returns $1, but we can over time remove that. And I would also like to move away from even dollar denomination on the peg and ultimately move towards some kind of like ETH denomination or some other index that we maybe figure out. Like maybe it's tied to the value of our underlying collateral. And that's where I think the RAI idea becomes cool, because RAI was almost like RAI used a peg that was like what they termed like the reflex index, which was a dampened version of the underlying collateral, which in their case was ETH. So they went for decentralization in the sense that it's like, we'll back it by ETH, we won't peg it to the dollar, but we'll have a peg, for a lack of a better term, it wasn't pegs, but that we'll have a floating price that is in some sense a dampened version of the underlying collateral. So I think something like that is a really interesting idea when you generalize that to a system that has much more assets in its collateral, and we have a good understanding of what that collateral value is, because we need to, because that we're already doing that. So we could, in concept, create an index of the underlying collateral value, risk adjusted, of course, and then create some kind of RAI like reflexor index based on that. That's like in concept, at least. It'll probably be in practice different, but philosophically, it's like a RAI based index of the underlying collateral. So then we have much more assets in the collateral, and the peg is more of a floating peg that's a dampened version of the underlying collateral. I think that's a really interesting idea. But yeah, we need to run, or we need to walk before we can run. So we'll figure out how to get the whole system working with the dollar peg, and then we can think about how we can remove the dollar peg over time and produce something that can completely stand on its own legs with no tether to the outside world. It doesn't need the dollar. It has no idea of what the dollar is. It's just using its own basket of crypto assets to create a stable coin that is keeps its own peg through incentives. The incentives being arbitrage and greed of ARB and LP profit, like LP yield. So if people want to provide the liquidity because they get fees, it's also a good place to do it because they don't. You have less impermanent loss. So you could put ETH Malt in and have less impermanent loss than if you put ETH USDC into a Uniswap pool. Plus, you're earning yield in ETH in fees, and you're earning ARB yield on top. So it's kind of compelling for LPs. So then they want to do that. The more liquidity we have, then the more likely our swaps are actually competitive, in which case traders want to trade on our DEX. And then if they maybe want to hold our token to get a fee reduction, especially if they're a high volume trader, then that system has nothing to do with the stablecoin. That's just like building good products for people to use. But in doing so, we've almost like tricked them, quote unquote, into like use our products because they're really good, because they give you the incentives that you want. They satisfy your greed, and I use greed in a kind of a positive sense in that regard. But in doing so, you're actually contributing to the stability of a decentralized stablecoin. And I think that's a grand vision, but it's a cool one, and it's one that we're working towards. And I think if we can get there and then we can move forward to some kind of floating peg as well, then I think we've built something truly special. But yeah, it was good hanging out with you all. I think I will wrap it up there. I'll just go through the chat one more time, see if there's any more questions. But yeah, I just noticed Tony talk about Luna. Yeah, that was a whole thing, wasn't it? The whole Luna thing, especially because like we launched Malt V2 that day, which is like wild to me that we managed to time it that well. But then maybe we're launching our new decks into the ETF, so hopefully we don't kill that. Cool. Oh yeah, like I said, I'll release the recording of this on the YouTubes, and I'll speak to you all in the new year. Hope you all have um, good rest of the year. You're all spending time with the family if you're celebrating the holidays. If not, keep grinding. Have a good time, and yeah, speak to you all in the new year. And hopefully, 2024 is our year where we finally ship it all, and we actually have a thing that works. And then the bull market happens, and we can we can be the overnight success that everybody will be like, where the hell did these guys come from? But the people that know. Bear markets where builders build. And we just had our head down. Cool. Well, thanks, guys.